Oh, we're live. I didn't realize that. Hi, everybody. You guys get to see a little insight into me reading and living as a human being. I didn't know that we were live. Hi, everybody. How's it going? My name is Behzad. I'm an actor. I'm a writer. I'm a producer. I'm an activist. I lived in Chicago for 10 years and worked at the Goodman a lot. I did The Matchmaker most recently at the Goodman. I worked on Disgraced at the Goodman Theater, a couple of seasons of Christmas Carol, and a bunch of readings at the Goodman. So the Goodman feels like a little bit like a second home to me. I'm currently in Los Angeles, where I'm working with Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, and where I am writing projects hopefully to get to television, and have been on a few television shows since moving out here. I'm also a founding member of something called the Chicago Inclusion Project, which seeks to level the playing field between women, people of color, LGBTQ, and people with disabilities within the arts and media world in Chicago. And today, I'm lucky enough to moderate one of these Live at 5 panels. And so the Goodman does a Live at 5 every other Friday. And they have these quarterly community panels where the question that we're really focused on asking is, what is the role of arts and cultural organizations play in community? And more specifically, what role do arts and community organizations and cultural organizations such as the Goodman have in community building? So to do that, we have brought 3 special guests along, and I want to introduce them. Before I do that, though, I want to say this. Right now, the world has kind of forced us to take a pause. We have COVID. We have racial and social justice sort of rise happening. We have an election year. And so all of that has sort of made organizations be able to take a pause and look back on the things that we're doing. And so we want to seize that opportunity and really interrogate the partnership that cultural organizations have with the city in an authentic way. So we're hoping that this can be an informal conversation. And for those of you watching on Facebook, on YouTube, however you're watching, feel free to write down questions. And we have people who will pump in those questions to us, and I will sort of spread those questions to our lovely panelists. And hopefully we can get some conversation going with you all at home as well. And at the end, we'll have time for even more questions. Okay, I want to introduce Naomi Davis first. Naomi is an urban theorist. She's an attorney, an activist. She is the founder of and president of BIG, which is Blacks in Green, a national sustainability and community wealth building network based in West Woodlawn, Chicago. And it advances green village building. I'm going to let her talk about that more. She also served on Mayor Emanuel's transition team for energy, environment, and public space, and was selected as a sustainability thought leader for Groupon's first annual Chicago Ideas Week. So I'll let Naomi tell you more about what she's doing. The next person I want to introduce is Dr. Marcus Robinson. Dr. Robinson has served as president and CEO of numerous corporations, but the one I want to highlight is that he's the executive director of Collaboraction. So that I'm excited about that, because Collaboraction is a theater company in Chicago that does involve their community. When they do a play, they always talk about it for almost equally as long as the play was after. They really are involved in the community in a real way. The other person I want to introduce finally is Dusty Sang. Dusty is the founder, director of the Ryan Lichtstein Foundation. He has dedicated his life to changing the course of bipolar disorder so that other children and their families can have better lives through the discovery of a biomarker test for bipolar disorder and through the breaking of the stigma that surrounds the illness and the death. He's the president of Stay Thirsty Media, a news and entertainment company, and he is a member of the Massachusetts General Hospital Leadership Council. And he and his wife are the recipient of the People of Vision Award. So that's amazing. I'm going to let all of them talk more about what they do, but I want to bring them on now. Hi, everybody.
Hey. How are you?
Happy Friday.
It is Friday. In quarantine, I feel like Fridays are Wednesdays and Wednesdays are
Yeah, what day or time is it really?
And I've been staying up later and later and later. There's been some times where, you know, it's like 6 a.m. and I'm still up. I haven't slept yet. I don't know if that's just me, but my whole sleep schedule is gone.
Are we all finding that time seems to move faster now? It's,
I don't-
you turn around and it's Friday.
Yeah.
Yes. I tell you this though, my car's getting like two weeks to the gallon.
Yeah,
I'm going nowhere these
that's
days.
right. Yeah.
That's actually not true for me. I've been driving to the beach a lot because it's empty. So I've been driving to the beach and like have the whole beach to myself because no one's there.
How sweet is that?
That's been nice. I want to let you all talk about your organizations a little bit. I know we did this for ourselves earlier, but we should key into people and let them get a little key in on what we talked about. So Naomi, can we start with you? Tell us a little bit more about BIG.
Yes, big. And I want to say that we were founded at the intersection of environment and economy. And that's really my calling and my love and my joy. We advance the walk to work, walk to shop, walk to learn, walk to play village, where African-American families live, where we own the businesses, where we own the property, and where we reduce greenhouse gases as a local living economy, and where we advance the conservation lifestyle. So it's definitely about village, it's about community, it's about relationships, it's about the climate crisis. But what we have done in the process of thinking about a higher road forward for African-American families is to say, okay, let's look 100 years out. Let's imagine 100 years out, because we are easily able to look 100 years back. We're Great Migration children, so many of us, that America's greatest underreported story, 7 million people voting with their feet, moving up south for freedom and economic opportunity. I'm a child of that. And so we understand that the opportunity for economic development really is at the center of what has been missing. So we stage our work based on the ability to increase household income, but we are based in this idea of relationship, the walkable village. Who do you know? What are the skills inside that village? What if the truck don't come? Okay, what can you do with your neighbors and a few good people? How can you, because you remember when Katrina came, who was on those roofs, right? Okay, we are our own emergency management system, and we are looking at all of those systems for self-sustaining Black communities. But part of the, just sort of the underlayment of all of that is, how do we tell our story? It's like, how do we be this, how do we express ourselves as the heroes in our own story? And that is not something that we generally, we just don't see it in the media. We see the opposite. We see genocidal images where, we're always the poor, we're always the broken, we're the drug addicts, the pimps, the whores. And you as a professional actor, Bezad, you know this, first hand, up close and personal, but theater was my first love. It was my first love, from Miss Irene's Dance Theater on Linden Boulevard in New York to Rudy Gray's Company in Black. And guess what? Dorothy Maynor, Harlem School of the Arts, and Barbara Ann Tier, National Black Theater. That's my pedigree. Then I majored in theater, and then I came out, even worked a few years at the League of Chicago Theaters. And I'm just telling you, I understand, believe, and stand for the power of theater to change hearts and minds when almost nothing else can or will. And so here at the Green Living Room, where we are right now, is definitely a place where if I were going to be the developer of it, and I was, we were going to have a stage here. We have a storefront studio stage, just like downtown, y'all. And we have performances, and we have presentations, and we have podcasts. But what I want to say about our work is that we are an antidote to the negative images that you see about Black people 24/7 in the commercial media. We love ourselves. We tell our story. And I would love to drill down more about that later on in our conversation.
I want to piggyback off two things you said before I bring the gentleman in. The first thing is you talked about sort of representation in the media, and that is my baby. That's the thing I think about all the time. And you mentioned some of the things for Black people, and it's happening for a lot of multi-ethnic groups, right? For my people, for Middle Eastern and South Asian people, there's a great actor in our community named Riz Ahmed, and if you all probably know him. And Riz Ahmed wrote an article in The Guardian that says, the first thing you have to do in this sort of white industry is you have to play the negative stereotype. So for those people, that's the terrorist. Then the second thing you do is you play the stereotype, which might be the cab driver. And then then you're allowed to play the nuanced individual. And so for Black people, that might be the thug as the negative stereotype, then the uneducated maid as the stereotype, and then they're allowed to be Viola Davis, right? And that you have to kind of go through that, and white people don't have to go through that. They're allowed to be nuanced from the beginning because there's a multitude of narratives. So that's some of the things that we think about. But the second thing I wanted to say, and again, but I'll bring the gentleman in a second. I'm working in LA with Patrisse Cullors and Janiyah Future and Melina Abdullah. They're the founders of Black Lives Matter, 3 women of color. And one of the things they talk about is very similar to what you talk about, which is that if there's community building and if people know their neighbors and they walk to the coffee shop and there's less of a need for policing because community can solve their own conflicts and they know each other, and people are less likely to even, they protect each other so they can actually prevent crime, because the police don't prevent crime, right? They come to crime afterwards and report crime. But So communities can prevent crime. They can keep each other safer. So as you were talking about all the ways it can help the arts, I was thinking about how it can help safety, public safety, without the need for police. So do you feel, you're on mute, but do you feel that might be a thing?
I absolutely do. I relate to everything you just said. That's why, for example, here at the Green Living Room, we have what we call the big screen. And there we have 24/7 images, positive images of Black people, whether it's
that's awesome.
Documentaries, whether it's movies, whether it's short clips, whether it's music video, whatever it is, it's just 24/7 positive. And brown skinned people, not just the curly hair and the creamy colored skin, which, and of course, not this infusion of interracial couples. Have nothing against it philosophically, but I understand what drives it, and it's evil. Black people like Black people. We don't have to be in love with someone from another persuasion.
Dr. Marcus Robinson, I want to bring you in, Marcus. How are, talk to us about Collaboraction. Talk to us about what's going on and what you're working on in life.
Yeah. So first, that little personal touch. I want to touch Naomi's work and say I found you in the green room over Thanksgiving as you opened your doors to the community to come in and share and to just enjoy the space, and then had the opportunity to come back around MLK's birthday celebration. And so it's just gorgeous community building that you're doing there, little place making, okay, using your work to settle the place. And that really relates to this idea I think Bezos speak to around, communities are the real source of crime prevention. That the police are not more police isn't the answer to the issues that we face here, but more community building is, because of those things that you pointed out. And with Collaboraction Theater Company, we tour our theater. We got a nice big stage at Kennedy King College, where we're the resident, theater company there. It's got big 300s, walnut, beautiful, cathedral for art making. But we tour those same shows into the neighborhoods, into the parks, and we invite the community to come out from the parks and see those stories, because typically those stories are written by somebody in their neighborhoods, because that's how we curate our work in many ways. And so that positive loitering community around the campfire of theater allows people to see some things, which is like have the community, have the theater say something to them, and then take that in and not just hold it, but rather now share it amongst their neighbors, person to person. How's this playing out in our neighborhoods, and what can we be doing to improve the quality of life for ourselves? Because if there is an answer, it's in every one of us, not in hierarchical systems of power. So I'll just put a comment in it there, so as to get into the conversation, bring Dusty in, and so we can get with this thing. So thank you, Green Room. Thank you for all that love you put out there, Ms. Davis.
That's lovely. Thank you. And Dusty, let's bring it to you. Talk to us a little bit about your organizations you're involved in and what you're working on.
Well, first I want to say that before we came on today, I took a little time and I watched a video, Naomi, that you did for the Chicago Ideas. It was fabulous. You were inspirational. And then Marcus, I had met your predecessor for Collaboraction previously, so I knew a little bit about it. But you had written an article where you talked about the spirit, nobility, and struggle of the people that you work with.
Yes.
And again, I'm sitting here and I'm humbled by the two of what you do. And you're really there and making a difference. And so I'm humbled by it. My story is different. Our son passed away at the age of 24 from bipolar disorder. He was a highly talented musician, artist, and writer. And growing out of his passing, my wife and I, and we'd had a lot of background in nonprofit work. We started a foundation called the Ryan Lichtstein Bipolar Foundation with a mission to change the course of bipolar disorder, which affects people all over the world, all different persuasions. And it's an illness for which there is no diagnostic test. It's an illness for which there is no cure. And it's an illness that many, many creative people have. So what we did in our son's honor was to start this foundation in 2004. And we raised money and put that forward for leading edge science. We work with some of the great scientists in the world. We are humble. I tease my wife, when we walk into some of these meetings, we have a brain trust meeting at Harvard every 2 years where they get their leading scientists in bipolar disorder together to meet with us. And we walk in and I say to my wife, the sound you hear is the IQ dropping by half as we walk in. So I think we're good learners. We understand the tragedy of this illness, how difficult it is. You see in the news today, Kanye West is obviously in a manic period. It's not his fault. This is just his biology. The question is, what can you do to help the person and the family? Then growing out of our son's talent, some of his friends approached us about 1.5 years after he passed away. They wanted to come over for dinner. My wife cooked, and we talked about our son. And they were all about 25 years old. And I said, "Gee, would I have done that at 25? Would I have 1.5 years later?" And growing out of that, our son had a philosophy to stay thirsty for things from the creative mind. He'd actually seen the words written in cement near in Old Town at Schiller and Wells. And so we decided we'd start what was in the beginning an internet rock and roll magazine. The kids would write stories, they'd go to concerts and stuff. Nobody had ever done this before. Our webmaster had designed one site. And this is back in 2006. And we every month got together and published the magazine without any fanfare. And about 1.5 years later, I helped us to get to be part of Google News, which was a big boost then all of a sudden. And now we're approaching our 14th year with the magazine. We deal with arts organizations all over the world, actors, musicians, symphonies, writers. Again, I have the privilege of working with really talented people, and it's just extraordinary. And they are feeling the struggle right now with the virus. So many are out of work. If you're a professional oboist and your Philharmonic is dark, and you don't have other skills, this is a tough time for you. And I have some thoughts about how you can look positively through what we're doing. We can talk about that later. So our life really has been changed by the passing of our son, trying to do what we can to change the course of this insidious illness of the brain through science and by changing society's stigma. We do an art exhibition. It's a competition. A family gives our foundation some money, which we then turn into grants for the selected artists. There are 20 that were selected each year for the last 3 years. And then there is an art exhibition. We've held it in Chicago for 2 years. And the new exhibition was scheduled for this October. And the limitation on entries was self-portraits by artists who have bipolar disorder. And the art is just, it will blow you away. And so it's a way to connect art, the creative brain of people with this illness, and the community. When last year, when we had the exhibition at the Zola Lieberman Gallery, my wife and I, there's an opening night and then it stays open for a few days. My wife and I went on one of the days, and there was a young girl about 30 and her mother. And they were actually standing in front of a self-portrait that our son had done of himself. And we introduced ourselves. And the young girl said that she was an artist. And then she started to cry. And she said, this show validated her as having bipolar disorder and as an artist, and to her mother, who was standing right there. And so it's these moments. And one of the things that I noticed of both your presentations is it's the stories of struggle, the stories of compassion and humanity. And my publishing company is focused on stories, because that's what drives us. Emotions are universal, but it's how people get through the day, how they conduct themselves, what happens in their life, how they triumph. I read that John Lewis, 2 days before he died, wrote this extraordinary editorial for the New York Times.
It's great. It's really
published
great.
On the day of his funeral, 2 days before he died.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
I mean, just it's these stories that just stop you in your tracks.
I want to say, you said that when you entered the Harvard think tank with all those smart people, you felt like the IQ dropped half. I think having the IQ to know when you're not the smartest person in the room on a subject is something that's really valuable, and we could use in our leaders right now. I want to talk about something. So to me, I look at the arts and acting as a service profession. I've talked with Kimberly Senior, who brought us together actually about this a lot, and we've actually discussed about how the Greeks said that the only way to have real change, real solidified, legitimate change, was to go through shit. That you had to go through something if you really wanted lasting change. But we as people, we don't like going through stuff. We don't like going through shit. So what if someone else could go through it for you? What if the artist, the singer, the fashion designer, the writer, the filmmaker could create something to be an avatar, to tell a story in which a character goes through shit and learns a lesson, so thereby you learn it by proxy so you don't have to go through it. So in that way, we are a service profession, helping people go through the shit. And so if that's true, then what are the differences between the mediums in which we do that? And so with television, where I work, someone else is deciding what we want you to look at. But with theater, what's special about theater is the audience is looking at the distance between the people, the energy between the characters, the actual distance. It's not just like, look at this face, and then look at this face, look at this face. It's actually look at between, right? And so right now, what is between us? COVID. And it's stopping us from having that connection. So I want to talk about what is COVID doing to the world, to your industries, to your communities, to your organizations. How is it helping? How is it hurting? Is there positives? Is there negatives? Just what can we learn from COVID? What can we bring out from it? Because that's what I want to talk about.
I know for me, I had to decide who mattered and to make sure that I expressed my love for them in the moment, like urgently, like I love you. So COVID was a call to action in a way to say, you know, remember, tomorrow isn't promised to any of us. It never was. But especially in these times, how do you decide? I mean, you know, I guess existentially, love is unlimited and it just is and all of that good stuff. But by the same token, we don't experience our love for everyone, and we're definitely not communicating it. But it got me into a mode that I'm happy about.
And I think love is attention. I think we like giving attention is a form of love. Giving energy to something, listening, giving focus is love, and we can't do that to everything. So I think what you're saying is COVID sort of made us reprioritize what we're going to focus on and do that. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Marcus, you're on mute.
Yeah. I tried to, sneak one in there on you. My sensibilities about this is that, this total slowdown in the way humans have been using themselves and the planet is a good thing. That the crisis of the moment is the crucible of our becoming more human, becoming more connected, becoming more vulnerable, at least recognizing our vulnerabilities and how no matter how we parse our differences, COVID levels the field for us and say, I got something for 100% of you. And that's a beautiful thing. And I'll go further to say that it is calling me at least to help my theater company and my consulting practice produce work that lives a lot in Dusty's space about what's possible for us in spite of the current circumstance, or in spite of my brain chemistry, or in spite of my social emotional circumstance, what's possible, and to tell those stories. And connecting to you, Behzad, it's really true that when you're in a theater and that actor is doing that thing and you begin to identify with that actor, we get on the same wavelength with them. And if we had an EKG on you and an EKG on me, you recognize that our brain waves and heart waves are lining up together, so we find true empathy, empathically finding each other. When I find you in the narrative, I can see myself in the narrative, and there when I find myself in that, there's something new for me. Like you can act out that thing, that
absolutely
tragedy.
And we're literally breathing this,
from it.
We're literally breathing the same air.
So yeah, I'm with that. Yeah, thank you for all of that.
We're breathing the same air. And something else.
Hear you, Behzad.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
That's me. I did that.
Okay. Yeah, and we're literally breathing the same air, right, in the theater, which is great. And something else I want to point out to people that I think people don't always realize this: theater is the only medium in which you're getting the live reaction to the live statement. I'm going to give you an example. If the line is, "I'm so happy to go to the Goodman Theater today." "Oh, did you see their last show?" is the response. In the theater, one actor is going to say, "I'm so happy to go to the Goodman today." And the actor is going to say, "Oh, did you see their last show?" But on camera, in film, on television, someone might say, "I'm going to go to the Goodman today," on take 3. And the response you see, "Oh, did you see their last show?" was like take 25, 2 hours later. And it's just edited together. It's not an actual visceral response from the thing that was actually said. And so the connection is broken. The energy is broken because we're putting together responses, but not actually getting the authentic call and response. And call and response is a historical thing that connects to us. So that's pretty interesting. I want to,
if I may.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
If you look at the process of reading a book, so Marcus, if you're the author and I'm the reader, there's a sacred trust, a compact between your mind and my mind. And if you let me down, I'm out the door. But if you grab me and you communicate with me, it creates something in my brain that is as alive as my picking up and holding a cup of coffee. And so the magic of the stage is replicated in a similar way, the magic of a book, because it's a private experience between me, the reader, and Marcus, the author. And if you don't let me down, and if you communicate, I can believe emotionally as if I were there in the scene. So it's a remarkable thing.
Dusty, you've worked a lot in, I don't want to say medicine, but just sort of in the more medical understanding disease and just sort of health field. How are you dealing with sort of watching the deterioration of fact and knowledge and listening to doctors and scientists with what's happening right now? Do you feel like there's a battle happening on listening to experts in science and doctors and listening to sort of the politicized movement of it?
So I asked one of the doctors that we work with, that he's at Mass General, young fellow originally from Nepal, working in a very almost science fiction area of cellular biology. And we were talking about the COVID epidemic in India. And I said, how are we going to trust the figures? And he said, in a straightforward way, count the dead. And so the dead are the facts. And if somebody doesn't believe, you say, all right, how many people were lost in America over the last 5 years, typically between February and June of every year? And you're going to get a number. And then you look to see how many more people have died. Count the dead. And then start with the facts of what's going on and try to build from there.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I want to connect that back to the work I see Naomi doing in West Woodlawn, and that is and it connects to where you're headed, Bezod, with the theater thing. I interpret. I'm using that word very specifically. The green living room as a space for devised theater, where everyone comes in playing their role and speaking their lines autonomously and synchronously, so that if you're in the space and you're interacting with folks, you can step back from your interaction and look to the left or look to the right and see a lot of that two-way and three-way, energy connecting stuff going on. So she's weaving a storyline together. It's a devised improvisation, if we can use theater language. So it's so beautiful in that way. And that's, goes back to the fact of the matter. The fact of the matter is that you and I matter. We are alive. And and there are things that impact us and don't impact us. But one thing that cannot be denied is the stuff that stops either one of us from breathing. So I love it that the Nepal scientists went back to the irrefutable fact of our being. And there is, even though we play in the magical in theater, we're playing with the irrefutable facts of human nature and the nature of our relationships to one another, and it gets played out in the narrative, the storyline, if you will. And from my discipline in psychology and philosophy, is all of human experience is narrative, and the question becomes, how much of that is rooted in the reality of our experience versus the fiction of what we would want. So
I love that about all of the human experiences narrative. That ties in the next thing I want to talk about, which was the value of arts in community.
And can I just jump in 1 second?
Please go ahead.
So Marcus, we just published a book by a young fellow. He's 33 years old and from Chicago. It's called Nobody Believes Crazy, and it traces the last 13 years of his life. He's been hospitalized in mental hospitals 6 times with bipolar disorder. And he has gone through emergency rooms for treatment 9 times. And there's something, and I've had discussions with the doctors at Harvard about this. We see so many manuscripts, and there are a lot of technically good writers. But when somebody has a mood disorder, like bipolar disorder, they put their words together differently. And it just jumps out at me. And so this book is magnetic from the moment you start it to the moment you finish it. He's a debut author, but you live in the space and the real estate of his mind in a way that's magnificent and terrifying. And that's the communication. But the thing you bring to, and Naomi brings, is vision. And you have the vision of bringing the community, Naomi, together and saying, here's how I see it. And if it goes that way, look at all the positive energy that's created for the people that live in that community. And theater does the same thing. When I would go to a play, you know, you walk out, it's either like, oh, God, why did we go? Or, you know, you're inspired. And so it's that inspirational moment, the place between the spaces and the silence, that really change your life.
We live in a culture that legislatively and politically does not value theater at all. When you look at the UK and there's a national budget for, you know, theater and national theaters, and the United States does not have even close to a proportionate budget. And sometimes I feel like even in society, we lose the value of artists. And what I mean by that is we really push our children to be doctors and lawyers and engineers and politicians and even firemen and police officers. We sort of put these up as like bannerhead positions. And we often forget about the role of the artist. And I think that one way to think about that and put it in perspective is that what do the doctors and lawyers and engineers and architects do when they come home? They read books and watch movies and watch television and listen to music and go to plays. And so we create the culture. Artists are creating the culture. And if culture is the mirror, then literally artists are the authors of the culture of our time. Artists are creating the mirror. So I think that's where arts show a lot of value. We are creating the culture of our time, and culture tells the story of our time, and culture shows the mirror to who we are. So it's one of those things where, how do you see, what do you think the value of arts are in the community? I know I've heard a little bit of how you guys utilize arts in your organizations. How can we continue to value the arts more in our communities?
Well, I would like to respond by breaking it into a few component parts, because Blacks in Green is one of the few nonprofit, you know, sort of, we're not a theater company, all right, but we've produced a musical. And we produced a musical called Migration the Musical. And we produced that musical because in our 5th principle, we are the authors of the 8 principles of Green Village Building. And the 8 principles of Green Village Building are conceived as what we call a whole system solution to the whole system problem common to Black communities everywhere, whether you're in Greenland, Russia, Sao Paulo, LA, Chicago, wherever you are. When you have this skin color, you have this synchronicity of problems. And our 5th principle in these 8 principles is each village celebrates its past, present, and future culture in stories, in print, digital, and theatrical form. So we're looking at how do we take what we know to be true about stories, which you so eloquently broke down just now. I mean, I've never heard it said that way, but I couldn't have said it better. What I usually say is that human beings are meaning-making machines, and the way we make our meaning is through the stories that we tell, and everything is a story. And so at Blacks in Green, I learned through the masters, Richard Gere from Community Performance International, and Kevin Iega Jeff, one of the Juilliard 100 of Deeply Rooted. I learned a process called community performance. And that process is where the community comes together and it writes its own story, but it comes up through the ranks of a very simple, elegant, powerful process called the story circle. And that's where, around 12 people may get together, they sit in a circle, they've got 2 minutes. You have a question that you frame, like talk about a time when you were the first one, or it could be anything. And then your job is to tell your story in 2 minutes, and their job is to listen reverently. Now, how many of us have skill listening reverently? Okay. That's part. Don't break into a coffee clash. Yeah, girl, I remember when that happened to me. Or you're looking at your, phone, like we always do, but just to really get in there in your listening to a person. And what we found at the time that we curated, 7 story circles with 90 people. We picked 5 stories of the real people who told their story. We put it on a stage. We added music, we added choreography, we provided a sort of a through story, and we produced it at the DuSable Museum of African American Heritage. And we did 2 shows. We had standing room only. We had 125 people in there, and the people were so hungry for this, just this love of themselves that they could see and that they could feel. So the idea that, we're looking, part of the magic, the miracle of theater is that we can somehow become invisible and suddenly be that person who's in that on that stage. We could be the villain, we could be the hero, we could be, the mama, we can disappear. And the idea that we can walk in another person's shoes, that's really the only place where that just routinely is supposed to happen. It happens, you do it, and you are transformed. And that's one of the reasons we think that theater and the work that we do, the sustainable square mile work that Blacks in Green does, is that when you're going to go into a community and you're going to do some economic development, okay, you got to start by producing a musical. You got to put on the show.
Put on the show. See, that's the dangerous thing right there. This is a trained artist who's also an attorney, who's also a community organizer, who's also a mama, blah, 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 who now takes the sum of who she is and then turns it back into the community. That right there is the power of theater and the power of artists creating culture or interpreting life such that culture becomes clear. I like to think of as culture bearers more so than the actual causative, I created the thing. No, I bear the thing. I bear the truth of it with my language, with my body. I give it to you with unabashedly. I just lay it out there for you to consume in any way you choose, like it or not. So, Bazad, I just love it that you were able to pull that out so that she could say that, because I don't think that would have been said if you hadn't come up with that, man.
I really do think that artists are the authors of the culture of our time. You are a great quote maker, Marcus. I just want to highlight that earlier you said, the crisis of the moment is the crucible of our becoming. That's pretty good. You got to
come on now.
You got to
put that in one of your plays. Say that on one of your TV shows. So I hear it, I go, dang.
It might be a while before I have the power to write my own lines on TV shows, but we'll see what happens. Dust, do you have anything you want to add?
No, the life of an actor is obviously not easy.
Oh, no, it's not.
But if you are able to achieve that role that is transformational, it'll live on forever, and it changes people's lives. The movies taught people how to kiss. The movies taught people social norms. The movies taught people how to smoke cigarettes. And so if you are lucky enough to get a role where you can go ahead and be a person, you can transform people forever. So it's a great privilege, a great honor, a great burden. And you've got to be good enough to be able to get one of those roles and then not screw it up.
Yeah,
So,
no, and I've been lucky enough to I never had sort of on a mass scale, but I've been lucky enough, even that play Disgrace that I worked on with Kimberly, every performance for several hundred performances, I stayed after for a 30-minute discussion with the audience and could really hear the change that was being made.
Exactly.
And it's sort of funny. You said, what's the evidence for the numbers? You say, count the dead. And sometimes I would say, like, what's the evidence for you're actually doing anything real with the theater? I was like, look how many people stay for a talk back.
Well, that's and they could leave.
They could leave, and look how many people stay voluntarily to talk about tough issues, with a bunch of actors. So yeah, that's interesting.
The other thing about the time we're in, if you go back and look at great literature, often there's a historical component. Maybe it's the Great Depression, or the Dust Bowl, or a war. And so the stories that are going to come out over the next couple of years of the tragedies and the heroism because of the pandemic are going to fuel the theater, fuel the movies, fuel the books. And I mean, we look constantly, we're beginning to see some of those stories. Part of my role is to sort of sit and stare at the wall and try to think ahead. My wife doesn't believe that, but so
she got a list for you.
That's right. Oh yes, I get that list every day.
Dusty, where were you in January to tell us what was going to happen? Why didn't you think ahead?
My wife actually had the virus in January, but we didn't know it. And she had all the symptoms except the breathing problem. And we had just finished an event for the foundation in Palm Beach, Florida. And we came back to Chicago. And no one knew. And we were back actually in Palm Beach in February because we had an event for the young friends of the foundation. And I remember sitting in a restaurant at the end of February, and it was just a boomy, bubbly time where the restaurants were full and the stores were full, and nothing was going to interrupt life at all. The train was going down the tracks. And 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, the world changed. Who could have seen that? But out of this terrible time will come the stories that Naomi and Marcus will put on and tell, and you'll be in. And it's just really a matter of finding the people who are writing them down and communicating them. But history is the great background.
And that, I think, brings it full circle, because this whole conversation is about community, and what you just described is community. That someone's going to do something in the community that's going to work with this person, who's going to work with this person, and we create our own little community.
But I do want to say one other thing about community, though, because the other part of what Richard Gere and Kevin Iega Jeff taught me was community performance for economic development. And that meant, in that idiom, that we had not only butts and seats and ticket revenues, but we have the opportunity to create an economy around theater in the communities where we live. I happen to live in a special community. We call it the Obama Presidential District. We're here just a stone's throw away from where the Obama presidential is slated to come. But years before I or anyone I know had a glimmer that it was coming, we were telling the story of the Great Migration of West Woodlawn, average everyday neighbors, and the extraordinary people like Lorraine Hansberry and Emmett Till who came out of our neighborhoods. We were doing the walking tours. We were finding a way to tell our story and monetize our story. And we could do a whole series on how Blacks have not been the beneficiaries of the monetization of our stories.
Absolutely.
And how do we turn that ship around? I mean, we have a little Michelle Museum next door. And I say next door, I mean in the green living room. Because we're trying to let people know, look, you can make a mug in your basement. You can make a t-shirt in the attic. You can, get your livery service going. Tourism is $1 trillion industry. And the story of authentic African-American heritage is an internationally coveted commodity. How are we getting to increase our household income by taking who we are, what we know, what we do, and putting that into a system of commerce?
Yeah, and this it's interesting. I talk about this just a few days ago. I did a different panel on something different, but this topic sort of got brought up. So, do you know what America's #1 export is?
Yes, culture, Black culture.
It's entertainment.
Yeah,
it's entertainment. And then when you look at entertainment, the top of our entertainment is Beyonce, Jay-Z, Hollywood. Michael Jackson. It's all of these things. And then you look at that and you say, God, 90% of writers' rooms are white.
Hello.
And I don't know the percentage of executives of the major 8 corporations in entertainment, but I would guess that 8 of them are white. And so then we have to start looking at the structural and systemic situations that when 42% of America is non-white, but 95% of our executives are white. It's so funny. We are a bunch of liberals in Hollywood, but writers' rooms in Hollywood are whiter than Trump's cabinet.
Oh, come on now. Talk that talk.
So we have to examine our own biases, even as so we have about 8 minutes left. And I want to encourage people who are watching to get any questions. And I just got an alert that my computer's dying, so I'm going to get my charger to plug it in. Maybe Marcus can entertain you all with more quotes.
More wisdom.
So one of the things that we look for is that, you say, how can you monetize it? So if you have a writer and they write a book and it communicates a story, that book can be published and they can monetize that story. And to us, it's really the authenticity that counts, not some flight of fancy. And so if you find authentic stories, let me know, because those stories will bring tears to people's eyes, will inspire them, will have them go out and be organizers, will have them go out and be role models. So it has to come from the grassroots, and then the marketplace has to respond to it.
Well, I think in terms of now with the death of the murder of George Floyd, that we are all looking at how we are lifting up the Black economy. And I'm going to go back to the point of the economy, not that the spiritual sense is lost on us at all, but that we understand that new systems have to be created. So what are the pipelines into the writers' rooms? What are the who gives up a seat so that someone else can sit at that table?
Who makes the table longer and adds some seats?
However a different voice happens into, if you go to any of the famous movie sites now, you got to look, and you can't necessarily find anything where Black people are not out of an idiom of poverty, drugs, violence, single parent homes, multiracial relationships, or something that signals that there's something fundamentally wrong. There's no tender stories of love between parents. There's no coming of age that ain't in the hood and you fighting the gangs. And, the infrastructure is really about following the money. And if you can do the math, and you can put a man into deep space and return him safely, as many have heard me say, we can figure out how to make sure that the money is flowing in ways that reflect reflect fairness, parity, and equity. And you got to do the math, though.
I agree with you on that 100%, and I'm in it, and I see it, and it's so insidious, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, right? Because when it comes down to money in Hollywood, that means it comes down to celebrity, and when it comes down to celebrity, I'll give you an example of something. If I create a story, an incredible story about an Indian American family, if I create that story, right, which has never been made, but if I create that story, they're going to say, okay, well, who are the celebrities that we can put in it? And then there's only 3 people on that list. And if those 3 people are busy, which they are, then that story doesn't get made. So now we move that story to 2021, to 2022, to 2023, to 2024. Whereas if a white person comes with a story and they have an incredible story, there's 500 celebrities available. So right there, that's the system in an example, is that we have to create the celebrities who can then be in the story.
It's the pipeline, baby. We gotta build a pipeline.
Well, who creates celebrities is the decision makers, right? So there's gatekeepers, there's decision makers, there's doors, and it all ties into each other. I do think we're benefited by people like LeBron and the NBA putting Black Lives Matter on courts and changing their jerseys and kneeling during anthems to bring awareness to these things, to say, hey, guess what? We got billions combined. We're a multi-billion-dollar institution, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do the thing that you think will lose us money, and it's not gonna lose us money. Nike stock is gonna rise when they support Kaepernick. Things like that.
Yeah. I want to touch that as I touched a couple of questions I saw pop up.
Yeah.
And that is, so one, the crisis has come and shut everything down. I don't think many people are on lots these days making movies and stuff. There's not a lot going on, right? This is an opportunity for communities of color, anybody, if you will, to begin to create new narratives and create communities around those narratives, to which there is a bonded exchange amongst the communities. You're doing stories about me and with people that look like me. I give you back my time, energy, button, a seat, and a ticket for that, so that we can continue doing this with each other. The systems that we inherited were not systems designed for us. It was systems designed for other reasons, for other people, and I'm totally like, go for it, have all of that. But there's an opportunity for us to create our own systems and our own narratives, and and what this technology does, it allows us to bypass all of that kind of stuff. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
With each other across this medium, it's going to be an amazing opportunity for economic parity in the space that you're talking about. I'm sorry.
No, I agree with you. I mean, if you look really seriously at the circumstances today, the likelihood of business returning to normal over the next year and a half, 2.5 years is zero.
Ever.
So if you're a film producer, a director, and you can't get the union to agree to have people come to the set, and people can't go to the theater, then all of a sudden these big budget movies are going to have trouble. And so people have to find other ways in order to communicate. And I think that if the theaters can't put people in it, the movie business is in trouble, because then it has to be distributed in a way that they can't make as much money as they would normally do it.
Yeah.
So in that disruption is opportunity. And that's what both of you were talking about. And what I'm focused on is, how do you go ahead? I mean, we distribute our books digitally and in paperback, but digitally, it's all over the world. It's instantaneous. Okay. So we can sell a book in India, we can sell a book in Japan, we can sell a book in Brazil, all within the course of a minute.
Right.
And so how terrific, because we're giving people a story, something to read about. They're downloading it to their phone and they're reading it while it used to be on the bus. But this gives, Hollywood was always a barrier to access. The studio bosses in the 20s and 30s, they owned the movie theaters and they were renting movies. And then they said, hell, why don't we just go ahead and make the movies? So they made the movies, they vertically integrated. They had so today you have Hallmark, Amazon, Hulu. They're doing this. Netflix, they're doing the same thing. Netflix is a perfect example. They make the programs, they distribute the programs, they own the channel. So,
Yes.
But in that, you're going to have a change for actors. You're going to have a change for directors, and it's a question of how you can reach people either on a micro level or a macro level. But opportunities will be there, because the traditional way we used to live all the way back at the beginning of March of this year is really over for a long time.
They also can.
But I want to say something to Behzad, because you were on How to Get Away with Murder, right?
Yeah.
And Viola Davis is famously recently quoting as saying, everyone says I'm the black Meryl Streep, but pay me like her.
Yep.
And I think that goes to Dusty's point, that let's get in there and really do what we know to be right, from the structural standpoints.
Yeah.
The audience will follow, because if the actor communicates this magic, this moments that you were talking about, Marcus, in the theater, if those moments, they're transformative, all of a sudden that actor drags along a lot of fans.
So Melissa was asking how we can support the artists in these times, and one of the ways to do that is to first of all, so if you see something, share something. If you see something you love, share it with as many people as possible, so that
there's another quote, y'all. Another quote.
You see something, share something, because that's how we get to know that Behzad is like the man. Not just because he's Middle Eastern, but he the man. Period. In the story, right? And so we love his work, and then so all the places where you find work you love, you share it. And then where you can't, and if you can take the next step, is where we find great work, pay something for it.
Absolutely.
Pay something for it. I would rather find 1 million people who could get behind Behzad's next film for $1. And especially if he does it on the low budget side of things, he can go a long ways with that $1 million revenue that comes in from all over the world, like Dusty's selling books all at one time. So and then locally, what we're doing is that we're seeking out artists, activists with narratives and stories that matter, and we're giving them the technology, the designers, the playwrights, and whoever else is necessary to bring that thing to life so that story can live. And we have them front and center in that thing, so that it is their body of work that we are now supporting with our company. So and then you pay money for that, and every little bit counts.
And speaking of every little bit helps, my girl Zara Fair's talking about teaching artists are also a part of the pipeline to stardom, and we need to support them as well. And wouldn't it be great for the successful artists to reach back and support the teaching artists with funding and resources? Yes, ma'am, Sister Wisdom Girl.
We got to wrap up pretty soon.
We have to go.
As an artist, I do want to say I agree. Find an artist that you identify with, that you love, that you support, that and financially support them if you can. There used to be a whole patron system, which is where the word patron came from. So I'm looking for a patron. I'll happily take a patron.
Come on now, put it out there, my brother.
Fund our projects. Like we talk about gatekeepers, right? So if I didn't need the gatekeeper, then I'll make a new gate. But I need someone to give me a gate. You know what I mean? So it would be great if we didn't need a gatekeeper. So these are things that you can do to help support artists. How can you help their dreams come true? It's not a handout. You're not giving them money. You're giving them access. You're giving them the tools. You're giving them the paint they need to paint the canvas. You're giving them the canvas. And
in doing so, you recognize that when you give the money to the big houses, you're giving it to the very same systems that are connected to the systems when you're marching out there a million strong saying, I can't breathe. So it's by going to the individual level, we can transcend the structural systemic.
So to wrap this up, I want to give everybody a chance to say where people can follow you and find you, or plug what you want to plug. For me first, I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram at my first and last name. So at BEHZADDABU. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, and I respond to any messages there that if you all have any more questions for me. And Naomi, for you, anywhere that people can find you or contact you?
Blacks in Green on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, oh goodness, I should know this because and our website is blacksandgreen.org.
Great. And Marcus?
Collaboraction.org is that space. drmarcusrobinson.com if you just want the pure, unadulterated
quotes. You want the quotes.
Can we stand it?
And for you, Dusty?
The Ryan Lichtstein Bipolar Foundation, you can find us at, or write to us at questforthetest.org.
Great. This was awesome. I had a great time. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Goodman. Thank you, Bezad. Loved it.
If the four of us ran some stuff, I think we'd be a lot better off.
Wait. Good night, y'all.
All right, good night. Thank you all so much.
Yes, indeed.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Dusty.